Welcome, welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. In true EOS spirit, we will start on time and end on time today. So welcome, everyone, on a Friday. Thanks for joining us. If you're wondering where you're at, we are covering the EOS Scorecard as our tool today. So if that's what you are here to learn about, you are in the right place. The Scorecard is what we call one of the EOS foundational tools. There are 5 of them. If you are here early, you get a chance to participate in our pop quiz of what are the 5 foundational tools. Feel free to throw those into chat or to let us know where you're zooming from today. Thanks for joining us, Tanya. Tanya's joining us from Denver. Got North Carolina on the screen today.
Vegas, Jersey.
Yeah, right up the road from you, Mark. Anybody want to take a guess at our 5 foundational tools in EOS? I already gave you the hint. Scorecard's one of them. There's 4 more. They're the 5 things that get you to 80% strong. Rochester. I go to Rochester a lot. Oh, we even got Haiti. I love that. Bonjour. Oh, Tony's in with VTO. People Analyzer. Close. What's another people tool?
Michael's got one up here. L10 Scorecard rocks VTO accountability chart.
Okay. Awesome. For the win. Hello to Holly in Tucson. I'm right up the road in Phoenix today. Let's see, we are at time to start. So welcome again, everyone. You are here to sharpen your saw on the EOS Scorecard. That is the foundational tool that we are going to learn all about today from my wonderful colleague, Mark. So I will introduce him in just a little bit. So we have lots of people joining us. Huge sign up and attendance today. So thank you for being here. We're excited to share with you. And we're appreciating that you're going to spend an hour of your Friday with us. So like everything in EOS, we're starting on time, we're ending on time. I will commit to that. My name is Megan Piper. I'm a certified EOS implementer. My practice in particular, I focus on working with distributed leadership teams. So this is my usual day on Zoom. I work with teams that work in a virtual environment. Mark will tell you a little bit about his practice when we introduce him in a moment. So we're going to focus on the scorecard. If you were experienced at EOS, you're still going to get some great tips and tricks from Mark. Today, he's an expert EOS implementer, so he's got many sessions under his belt to give you advice on how to up your game in the scorecard. If you are new today, we're also going to give you some basic ideas to get started on scorecard and some technology you can use to help to advance that. So I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping items before we move over to our actual content. First and most important is that our session is being recorded. If you desperately want a copy of it, just let us know and we can send that to you. This is a webinar format. So one of the things that makes me and Mark sad is that we cannot see your beautiful faces. So please interact with us by using emojis. You can, do the hearts or the celebrate or the clap or raise your hand. Actually, you can't raise your hand, but you can put questions into chat or you can put questions into Q&A. If you put something into chat today, I will try to answer it as we go along. Just recognize I'm helping Mark out, so I might not get right to your question immediately. If you put something into Q&A, that's going to be the last 20 minutes or so of our time together. We will organize those questions, make sure we get to them all. So that's the place to get an answer later. If it's urgent, put it into chat. I also have a couple of great EOS colleagues in the background that will send you materials and all kinds of stuff as you put things into chat today. So if we can point you to a resource on our website, we will do that as we go. Let me see. Let me make sure I've covered all the things that I should, folks. I think that is it. We are ready to get started. So welcome to our facilitator, Marc Dispensa. Take it away.
Great. And just to do a quick tech check, Megan, can you see my screen?
Yes, all looks good.
All right. Great. So everyone, hi, welcome today. My name is Marc Dispensa. I'm an expert EOS implementer. My practice is primarily centered around software as a service. That's been my background. I also have a bit of background in business intelligence and data warehousing. So with that, everyone can see my screen. Here's our agenda for today. So our agenda, we're going to go through Scorecard 101, some basics, what a scorecard is, what it isn't. We're then going to go through Scorecard 201, give you some information around scorecards, how they work, the foundational elements. Then the heartbeat. This is where we hope you guys are going to ask lots of questions. We're going to leave plenty of time for this in Q&A. So with that, we're then going to conclude the meeting with about 2 minutes left. And we're ready to start. So here we go. Let's start with what the scorecard is. So first, it's all about data, right? It's all about the main information. The scorecard gives us a pulse on the business. It gives us a heartbeat, right? It's a tool to drive accountability. This is not just information for information's sake, okay? It's information so that we know what's going on and we can hold people to a standard. It connects each seat to the company vision. So ultimately, and I'll cover this a few different times, is there's someone accountable for a number. It connects each of the seats to where we're going. And typically it's leading indicators. 2 to 1 is a great ratio. Things that we're expecting to happen so we know the outcome. Tracking leading indicators to get there. So that's what a scorecard is. It's all about the data. It's a tool to drive accountability, connects each seat to company vision, and it's leading indicators. Now let's be clear what it's not, okay? A scorecard is not a deep dive into your financials. This is not about your entire P&L, every single piece of information. Again, it's designed to give you a pulse. It's not a replacement for your BI tools. So if you're using deep analytics, if you're using Power BI, if you've got crazy pivot tables in Excel, that information is what, when you find something that's wrong in your scorecard, you need that backup information to go find out. Okay? It's not nice to see. A scorecard isn't oh, you know what would be great is if we could just see that number occasionally. These are the heartbeat numbers. These are the foundational ones that you need to know, how are we doing? So, Megan, just a quick check on your side. Speed and tempo good?
All is great. Keep up the great work, Mark.
So this is the EOS model. And I'll quickly cover this because just to remind, if you guys haven't seen this, it's our model. It starts with vision, helping companies get crystal clear with where we're going. People, helping getting the right people in the right seats. Data, scorecard and measurables, making sure we have a pulse on our business. If we have a clear vision, we have the right people in the right seats and good data, it helps us smoke out issues. With that, we also have a process component, documenting the checklists, the right processes for the organization. And lastly, you can't achieve a great vision without traction. It's hallucination. That's just a reminder. I feel forced to say it and take everybody through our model whenever I see it. In today's conversation, we're talking about data. So in the model, one of the 6 key components is scorecard and measurables. And so in order to get the most out of the data component, you must believe the 7 truths and 6 fundamentals. Great quote slide from my implementer, Peyton. So Peyton, thank you for that. Here's what a scorecard looks like. For those of you who haven't seen one before, there are measurables. Remember, I said leading and lagging indicators. 2 to 1 is a great ratio for you to remember. It's weekly. And ultimately, we have a measurable and then we have a goal, okay? Who is accountable? This is the seat. When we have a number on the scorecard, who ultimately is accountable for owning that number? So we have accountability. We have what the number is, again, leading and lagging indicators. We have a goal. And then 13 trailing weeks. So pop quiz, anybody know why 13 weeks? Anybody?
I know.
Ooh, what is it?
To spot patterns and trends, Mark.
There you go. Nice. Good job. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
So the 2 to 1 ratio is really, it gives you a sense for, I saw the question pop up. The leading indicators are things that you're looking for, the activities, the metrics. You're looking for a certain amount of phone calls, a certain amount of proposals. The lagging is what was the result? Did it close? Right? So you're looking for the 1 or 2 things to track what's happening, the activity, and then the trailing effect so you can see both.
Can I interrupt with one quick question, Mark? Which
Yes.
I also love that everyone else had an answer to your question too. The 13 weeks at a glance is living in the 90-day world. So you want to say 90 days at a glance. I love it. Ashley's asking, can you talk more about the 2 to 1 ratio? I think that relates to something you were just mentioning.
Yeah, that's the question that was the question I was trying to answer, which was for your leading metrics, it's 2 numbers to 1 outcome, right? 2 leading to 1 lagging. So 2 leading would be number of phone calls to number of proposals to close deals, right? That's an example of 2 to 1.
Thank you for explaining it again for slow people like me.
Cool. So I thought a scorecard is supposed to be all leading. They don't have to be all leading. You do want a sense of what's the outcomes. So 2 to 1. They can be all leading depending on your business. I don't want to negate that, but leading to lagging. So with that, here's an example. So I showed you guys a theoretical example in a sort of spreadsheet format. This is EOS 1. So what you're seeing here is a scorecard represented in our software. Right on the left-hand side, you have measurables. You have your person who's accountable right here in the bullets, our goal, and then the weekly metric of what's happening. So you have your weeks across, you can see what happened, and your leading indicators. So it's a great, easy way of visually representing what we talk about in the room with Scorecard and actually activating in here. A quick point to note is if you're not using EOS 1, it's free for the first user. So if you go in, you want to create a test scorecard, it's a great place to see how they work, run it, and see if the software might be a fit to help you guys out if you're not using it yet. So with that, Julie also put a link in. So if you guys need that link, and we're happy to talk about EOS 1 also in the QA. If you guys have questions, Megan, anything for that one?
And people are still loving your 2-to-1 ratio in the chat.
Seems to be a new thing.
Yes. Something I like to remind people of is like a leading indicator in one area can be a lagging indicator somewhere else. So, you know, there's a handoff between the functions. So don't go too black and white on this, guys. It's that you have the pulse on the things you're doing that drive the future results of the business.
Yes. And it's to know are the activities you're measuring having an outcome, right? That way you can tell we're doing these things. Are we having some level of outcome? And that's the leading to lagging. So this way you have them both there. Another thing to sort of think about is your scorecard. I was going to cover this in a bit, but since we opened that up, your scorecard is a living, breathing, functional tool. If you're noticing things and patterns and a number works for you, great. Keep using it. But if you find that a number doesn't show meaning or there's not an outcome and it's not useful, drop it down to your issues list in your level 10 meeting, because this is where you're supposed to be discussing it, and say, this number doesn't quite work. Why? And optimally, if the number needs to change it. I'll give more tips and tricks on that one with red and green, but I at least want to touch on the fact that your scorecard should be living and breathing, right? If you're finding that a number is not useful, why is it not useful and what needs to change? All right, so numbers for all. Every employee should have 1 to 3 measurables they are accountable for achieving each week. Starts with the leadership team and it works its way down, right? We talk about measurables. So these are our measurables. If you're in a seat, what does it mean to be successful in that seat? Employees must have the ability to control the numbers. You can't hold people accountable to something they can't drive, right? So this is something they can influence, right? If I'm in a job, so I'll use software as an example. In software development, we have something called story points if you're running on Agile. And if you're a junior developer, you're supposed to be getting 4 story points completed over 10 days. Mid-levels are 6, high levels are 8 for senior level guys. The junior developers, they have their level of effort. Their work effort dictates how much they can be putting in, therefore it can be measured. They should be visible on the leadership team scorecard, departmental, and in quarterly conversations. Tips and tricks, use the accountability chart and the 5 roles to identify the numbers. Right? It's an easy way. If you look at your accountability chart, think about this as if these are the areas of responsibility, how can I measure these? How can I measure the outcome? What's the effect or the leading number that I'm expecting? So far, so good. Megan, anything to add there?
No, keep on going, Mark.
Sure.
Sorry, busy chats here.
Lots of stuff in there. Okay.
Yes.
So guys, those are some 101 sort of concepts. We're going to move into 201 here. And in 201, this is something we teach our clients, right? In our first session, we help build scorecards with our clients on that first day. We call it a focus day. And we cover something first called the 7 truths. Now you've seen this worded in different ways. Peter Drucker has a variation. This is a variation on Peter Drucker's quote. What gets measured gets done. If you're measuring it and you're looking at it, it creates momentum. Number 2, managing metrics saves time, right? When you're looking at numbers, you're removing the politics, you're removing the conversations. It helps you move forward. Are we doing good or bad? It cuts through a lot of that conversation. A great scorecard gives you the ability, gives you a pulse, right? What we talked about earlier, which is it gives you a sense of what's happening and it gives you the ability to predict. These next 2 are critically important. You must inspect what you expect, right? To the point before, this 2-to-1 thing I'm going to get implanted in everybody's head, even though I don't know if it's the right or wrong thing to do. But in that regard, right, we're having phone calls, we're putting proposals together. Is it leading to deals? We need to look at that. Is it actually driving what's happening? Number 5 is critical. You can have accountability in a culture that is high in trust and healthy, right? This is not a tool that we're putting on people to make them feel, oh no, here they come, they're trying to micromanage us. That's not the case. We want to create a culture where people feel accountable to the number, we're reporting on the number, and that everybody understands what's happening, right? We want an open book so we can see it, so that we can hold each other to a higher standard. Number 6, a scorecard requires hard work, discipline, and consistency to manage, but it is worth it. To the point I was making earlier, you're going to come up with, my hope is that if you guys have a scorecard, you're going to get some information today to have a better scorecard. If you don't have a scorecard yet, and you're not really using one, get started, right? Start putting one into place. And with good consistency in using it, you're going to find the right numbers. And number 7, one person must own it. So these are our 7 truths. Megan?
Yeah, back on, is it number 4, the inspect, expect? I love that one. And what I often say to clients is that people are going to start to notice what you're tracking. And that starts to drive behavior. And so that can help to get people on board with your vision, because we're driving these things that are going to help us to achieve those financial results that we've named on the VTO. And also, if you realize you're driving the wrong numbers or driving the wrong behavior, remember that Marc shared that this is a living thing. You constantly need to refine your scorecard to be driving the right results. So make sure you're tracking the right stuff and you're driving the right behaviors, because it helps everybody achieve your vision with you.
Yep. I saw one come down in a glance here. We tried measuring a few numbers. We're at the next phase of growth. How do we determine the right numbers to look at for that continued success? This is advice. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know your business, but I would say, what are the things you're moving into? What are those numbers? So your scorecard can represent also, you may change it quarter over quarter or add a number or take something away. What are those areas of growth? What are those other numbers that you think you should be measuring, right? Just if you look at it from, take a step back, put it on your issues list and say, okay, what are the numbers? If we've experienced growth, where are we looking? Where can we track to? And I think the ability to talk through it.
One more quick question that a few people are asking in both areas, Marc, is around that number 7. What do we mean by one person owns it? People are like, what do they do? Do they oversee it? Do they police it? Do they fill it in? Like, what do we mean by that?
Sure. One person must own the number, right? Ultimately, it's your number. It's whoever owns that number is responsible for driving the outcome of it.
And I do think sometimes I'll notice on a client's scorecard, they'll have somebody's face next to the measurable, and it's the person who fills it in every week. That's just an administrative task. Like it's really that person who's driving it, like Marc is saying. Right. That's really important. They got to own that.
It's your, right. It's owning the number, meaning you're responsible for when you, after you IDS it, it's your number, right? That's your job. It's your measurable that you are accounting for. To your point, to Megan's point, there may be an administrative task for somebody else to go fill it in. Filling it in doesn't mean own it. Own it means it's a responsible number for your seat.
And somebody owns that overall scorecard. Like once in a while, the integrator has to guide the team to zoom out, look at the whole thing. Is it creating the right patterns and trends for us to drive the overall business? So there's different levels of ownership within it. Okay, I think we answered those ones. Thank you.
Okay, you're good. All right, now the 6 fundamentals. They are to be reviewed weekly with your leadership team. Of all the things I get, of all the elements, of all the conversations, a lot of times it's, well, we can't really break that down. We run our business monthly. So when I hear that, that's great. You're still going to remember to the points before, you still need those numbers. You still, your monthly, you may bill once a month, and that's a revenue number. But what are the numbers that make up that number? What are the things we can track to drive changes? So for example, what are the things that drive revenue? Right? What are the things, the activities for us that we know? And here's the biggest reason why they should be weekly. If you have a number and you want to see a change, or you want to know if something you're doing to fix it is driving an outcome, how long will it be before you can see the change in the number? If it's a month, it may take another 2 to 3 months to see that delta. If it's weekly, you know the actions you're putting into effect will have faster outcomes to see those changes. So 5 to 15 numbers, 10 is ideal, right? Less is more in here. So again, this doesn't mean that you're not replacing Power BI. You're not replacing those business intelligence systems that help you dig into numbers. but these are the numbers that give you a pulse, a heartbeat. Someone is accountable for each measurable. We covered this a second ago. There's a goal. Again, the point of a scorecard is you have to know if something's good or bad. If you don't have a goal and you're just looking to track it, that's a nice to have number. If a goal is not hit, you drop it down to the issues list. So we say this, the scorecard is the first item in your level 10 meeting. If your numbers are off track, it needs to be an issue. 13 weeks at a glance. The piece here that I just want to illustrate and really hone in on is, if you see a number is red, what starts to happen is the tenacity of the group is, whatever, they don't care about it. Or you feel like it's not an issue. Here's the thing. If you can quickly go through your scorecard and explain, that's because it was Christmas and everybody was out of the office, right? Fine, move on. Just make sure the next week it goes back. But if a number for 2 or more weeks is red and you don't drop it down, 3 things. You're either not acknowledging the issue. It's sort of like, hey, going on the scale and you're not looking at the number. It's not important, or somebody doesn't care. And so if you see that consistent red number, you're allowing it to happen. And the other one is, maybe your goal is wrong. Maybe it's an ideal state that your number is, and you're not really acknowledging the fact that you're never going to hit that number and it's not real. Mm. So just some fundamentals. Megan, I don't know if you have anything there, but I wanted to hone in on a few of those points.
Yeah, something that we see a lot as implementers is that your scorecard is an early warning system. Like, it should be screaming red or green at you. Like, I can tell how a client is doing just looking at their scorecard, even without looking at the measurables, just in the pattern of red and green that I see. And so we don't want you to get desensitized to that red. Like, you want you to go take an action to change it. And to Mark's point, if you have an aspirational goal on there, it's always going to be red. And you're just going to get used to seeing red, and it's going to lessen the effectiveness of having a scorecard. So it's better to give yourself a little bit of a goal that's going to help you to grow as a team and to change behaviors and to make different actions, and then put that goal up again when you're ready to keep putting it up. But don't put it aspirationally too high. It'll desensitize you.
Cool. So I saw one quick one pop in, red and green. So red is off track, green is on track, your goal, your metric, right? So greater than or equal to, greater than, minus, whatever the metric is. Green is positive, red is negative.
There's also a series of questions back on that last slide, Mark, around the 5 to 15 and the different layers of scorecards within a company. So is it 5 to 15 overall in the company, just for each scorecard? People have a few questions around those nuances.
Sure. So it's 5 to 15 numbers per scorecard. So your leadership team should have 5 to 15 numbers. Your sales team may have the similar metrics that drop down. Each department, so if you think about your accountability chart, if you have one, your leadership team has a scorecard. Your key departments have scorecards, and then each individual contributor or job function has measurables. So 5 to 15, if you think of it this way, your leadership team has 4 seats, sales, marketing, operations, finance, whatever those might be. That's 1 to 3, so 2, 4, 6, 8 numbers. Your visionary, your integrator, 9, 10. And then you could think about your next team's layers below, different scorecards. Each team, ideally, in your accountability chart has a level 10 meeting.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, so the scene, some questions. Sorry, I'm just laughing setting this up. You're in a level 10 meeting. Your sales and the measurables are off track for the 3rd time in a row. I may have already given this answer. You're on the leadership team. What should you do? Multiple choice. You guys ready? So the scene, setting the stage. You're in your level 10 meeting. Sales numbers, right? So sales proposals are off track. For the 3rd time, the team hasn't delivered the proposals. You're on the leadership team. What should you do? A, ignore it. It'll probably get better next week. B, wait for the sales leader to say something. C, check your phone. D, say drop it down. So I didn't even get, so, all right. Thank you guys.
I'm so proud that we're getting a lot of D's in the chat on this one. So nicely done, folks.
We drop it down, avoid politicking, avoid discussion. All right. So achieve consistent results, getting what you want, simplify and predict. So I'm going to introduce a tool called Getting What You Want. This is in the EOS toolbox. We teach to our clients. And so up above, you're going to see this is the idea of working backwards. And this is an example of when you're stuck, if you want to create a scorecard. And so ultimately, It is an awesome tool for developing processes. Thank you. That's great input. So the idea here is it's also for process and numbers. So in this case, what do you want? What's your outcome? What are you trying to drive? So this is actually an example of if I was a EOS implementer, right? And I was looking for what should I ideally get? Maybe I'm looking for one new client. So if I'm looking for one new client a month, I should be presenting proposals to a month in order to do that. So think of this as working backwards. So in order to get a new client, they need to get a proposal. They need to create a proposal. There needs to be a needs assessment, first meeting, contact, having a target list. Now you start, the way to run this tool, and I'll cover it very simply, is you start backwards with what needs to happen. And then you work towards what are the metrics. So in order to get one new client, how many proposals do I need to send out? How many proposals do I need to create? These happen to both be the same metric, right? So this is an example of you, not 2 to 1 might not be here. How many needs assessment do I need to deliver? How many meetings? How many contacts? And how many prospects? So this is an example of a way of getting what you want, thinking backwards, and 2 components. You're building a process and you're figuring out what are the key numbers that you're tracking in that process. So before I go any forward, Megan, anything you want to add on the getting what you want tool? Because there's a lot to unpack on this one, and it's a simple tool that drives a great amount of outcomes.
I love this tool. It's becoming more and more my favorite as I teach EOS. Sometimes I think people in general with EOS could get too wrapped up in the mechanics of something. Like, don't get too wrapped up in, did I get them in the right order? It's more like, what's our outcome? What are the activities that drive that outcome? And what are a couple of moments within those activities that we could track to make sure we're always driving towards it?
Yep. So again, it's a lot of times too, when you're, and this is the earlier question that was asked, and I didn't answer it there. When you're getting advanced, when you also are looking for the next stage of growth in your business, when you're trying to figure out areas, this is a great, simple tool to think through what are the steps, what are the outcomes that should happen at each step, and the things you can measure. Good. I know we're getting a lot of questions on this one.
Yes. We are, and I can see you're towards the end of the slide deck. We have about 30 questions in Q&A. So
Okay.
No worries, Mark. We've got tons of content.
We have tons of content. All right.
Yes.
So guys, with that, I'll actually introduce one other thing. Megan will give you guys this tool. She'll put it in the chat afterwards.
Yeah.
One idea is also in this example, right? You can use ChatGPT is a great tool. I'm not going to get into all the ins and outs of why and how to use it. But another example is if you're using ChatGPT as a thinking tool, this is a great example of, hey, how I have an idea for something, help me work backwards in my process. This is just a great one of those examples that you can work through the process, get some numbers. And I'll go through some other ideas in areas, but I wanted to make sure I covered, hey, this is a great example of a thinking tool that if you're stuck, log into ChatGPT and kind of go back and forth. It's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I'll pop that into the chat right now so everybody has it. Of course, now the paste isn't going to work, right? Let me see if we can do this. There's the prompt.
Oh, yep. So there's a prompt for, so guys, that's a simple prompt for if you're stuck and you want some ideas. Here's a great one. You could replace the commercial HVAC with revenue and employees. It'll give you just ideas. Don't use ChatGPT to build your scorecard. Use it to get some ideas if you're stuck or some growth areas. Wanted to provide some value there that you can just cut and paste to get you kind of thinking, get the juices flowing. Because a lot of the conversation may stem from, do you have examples for? Here's a great way just to kind of look for some examples.
And then I'm putting in the different steps on how to effectively advance the answers that you get. It just didn't let me put them all in at once.
All right. So we got a meeting we've covered so far. So just to cover where we're at today, we've had our meeting pulse 101, not meeting pulse. We've had scorecard 101, scorecard 201. We're up to Q&A.
I have one quick last question I'll ask from the chat. A few people are curious, what's an example from getting what you want that isn't sales related? Like somebody was asking about how would you track outcomes for a virtual assistant, for example, like something totally unrelated to sales.
Sure. So virtual assistant, what would you, as an example, what are you going to hold? What's the outcome that you want the virtual assistant doing at the end of the month? Is it, so I'll use, again, I'm thinking on the fly here, but I'll give you a real world example. So one of the things that Erin, who's my admin, we have WOW events. or wow, we call them wows. And one of the things is we've got, call it 30 clients or so, or 100 clients in the past. And we're scanning all the time for, is it a birthday? Is it an event? Did somebody get married? Did they hit $1 million? They hit $10 million. So if we have 8 wow events by the end of the quarter, well, what needs to happen before that? We need to send something out, do some research on it, review 25 LinkedIn posts or send it out, or event, like working our way backwards in that one, starting with the 8 wow events. And then the process, working our way backwards or in any order, which is investigate LinkedIn, find something that happens, review Salesforce, find a gift for $100 or less based on the profile that we know they enjoy, send out at least, one thing or something like that. But the getting what you want is, what I want is to deliver 8 wow events per month per client. And then I work my way backwards. Megan, I don't know if you have an example. That was one I thought of on the fly.
Yeah, that's a great one. Like, I have response expectations from my virtual assistant, how quickly we get back to clients. And so like a couple things we track in her process are, do we always meet our expectations around response time? Like percentage of client related tasks that were done on time that week. Like we're just making sure we do our process right. Because as Marc had mentioned, like this is a process driving tool as well as an outcome driving tool. All right, you ready for some other topics, Marc?
Yep, go ahead.
I'm going to take a really global one to start us off. So someone's asking, how do you get everyone on board with EOS? I'd say like that applies specifically to the scorecard as well. Like, how do you get everybody to own the scorecard and own EOS?
Sure. So let me just make sure how do you get them to own the scorecard, or how do you get everyone to run a level 10 meeting?
I think it was more specifically like, how do you get people to want to buy into EOS? And then more specifically the scorecard.
So if you're self-implement, this would be again, more advice, open-ended, and anybody jumping in the chat. I know there's some other people here. I say the level 10 meeting is a great place to start. The scorecard is the first thing on that level 10 meeting. And it gets the reason for that level 10 meeting is it gives you a structure for keeping everybody on pace. And what it contains is your scorecard, your numbers. So knowing how are we doing today? How is our business? Are we healthy? Your rocks, your priorities, how are we marching towards our future? Headlines, getting everybody in the know of good and bad news, right? Just sharing information around the team. Ultimately, then driving your to-dos. How do we do from the outcomes? And then your IDS, which is where you're talking. I think the importance of that cohesive glue is you're keeping your team together. It's keeping everybody engaged. You're giving everybody the opportunity to speak. And especially you're starting with the numbers and it drives the conversation. So I think scorecard is a piece of it, but the level 10 meeting is what binds it to keep the momentum driving forward. So it's not just random numbers. It's kind of baked in, which is your scorecard is helping you run your day-to-day. Your level 10 meeting is where you get together to drive outcomes, and then you remeasure it week over week.
Awesome. How about processes? A few people are curious, how do processes actually tie into the scorecard?
Sure. So your key processes, there's a few. At a leadership level, if you have a proven process. So for those of you guys who have seen, one of the things we talk about in EOS is our marketing strategy. And the marketing strategy has your target market, your ideal customer profile, your uniques, the 1, 2, and 3 things that in combination make you unique to the customer. And then you have your proven process, which is how you work. And so one of the things that works really well is if you have a proven process, it describes what that looks like at a high level to work with you. And you can put measurables into that process that describe how are you doing, right? So if you look at that process, those measurables, the same example with what I showed earlier in sales, there's a process that takes you through it. Ideally, think of a process as a checklist, the major elements, the major areas, and can you put the numbers to those major areas? So your sales process, your marketing process, your key operations process, your accounts payable process, they're all areas that you can see leading numbers or lagging numbers on the leading numbers are getting what you want. What are you looking for? And then if you have any lagging numbers, what's the result?
Yeah, the scorecard is your friend when it comes to process. Like you're going to know if your training is effective because your scorecard is going to tell you every week. It's going to be all green if people are getting it and pushing the process along. So thanks, Marc. There's a few more questions around the 13-week cycle. Like more than just the spotting patterns and trends, people are curious, like how often do you refine your scorecard? How often do you change stuff?
So it should be, if something doesn't make sense, you drop it down and you make it an issue during the weekly if you can. Otherwise, if you're running on EOS and you run a quarterly session, quarterlies are once a quarter, you have them typically in an offsite meeting. You run through, you have two types of issues, long-term and short-term. You're either fixing it in the level 10 meeting or in the quarterly, if there's a reason to bring it up as an issue, I would suggest you adjust it then. Biggest thing though is look for things that are not driving results, right? If you're seeing consistent red, you got to stop and ask yourself, why are they red? And sometimes scorecards, I'm guilty of this as well. You start adding a few things. Oh, wait, we need this, we need this, we need this. Sometimes it's good just to take a clean slate and go, hey, you know what? Great, we have something. If we were to start today, what would we do? And match it up. That sometimes is a good exercise to run. If we were to create a new scorecard from scratch, what should it look like?
Yeah, it allows you to evolve the business better. Related to that, a few questions around when the scorecard's just reporting things, but it's not actually driving things, like the ability to get it to having the right stuff on it. Yep.
So I think, so there was another question too that popped up, which is, if it's always green, should you push your goals? So these are kind of related. I think in that regard, they really have to be dry. Are they numbers that are giving you a pulse? Why, ask yourself, why are we looking at this number? If everything's always green, then yes, absolutely. You should be like, hey, we could do more. Why are we not like push yourselves? You should do more. And again, if you're growing, some numbers are binary, right? They're usually there for good or bad. But if it's growth and you're constantly beating the number, yes. I mean, you should ask yourselves the same question, invert it and go, we're exceeding our targets by 30, 40%. Our goals are too low. And on the other side is, if the number's not telling you something, make it an issue. Be like, this number's useless. Like, it's not doing anything. It's there for, remember, go back to the truths. It's just informational. And for that, it doesn't belong on your level 10 scorecard.
Yeah. I find people don't get impatient often enough with their scorecard. Like, you should be annoyed if you're reading something out loud every week that isn't serving you. Like, go figure out the thing that will.
So, well said. If it's a stupid number, say it's a stupid number.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't just drop it down because it's red. You drop it down because it's annoying you. How about someone's question? If the goal is not hit, do you drop it down? Is that every week or just when it turns red? Like, how do we know when to drop it down?
Well, if the goal's not hit, it turns red. It should turn red, and that should be the indicator to drop it down. I don't know if that was pure or not. I don't know if that was.
Yeah, I think so. I think you got at it. I just thought a few times. Just for the audience, there's a lot of questions that are related to the software, or like, where can I find a level 10 recording? My EOS friends in the background will hop over and answer you on that kind of stuff. So Julie and Kelsey, I've moved that over to answered, and you can probably see those and just type some stuff in. For you, Marc, there's a few that are more specific to particular industries, and I wonder if it would help people to walk through some examples. Like, how about if you have a group of companies covering multiple retail stores or restaurants or real estate holdings? Like, how would you approach a scorecard there?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I've got different, so I have some clients who are franchises as an example, and they own 30 stores or even differentiating stores. So the challenge is, as a leadership team, this comes down to more, I think, about your accountability structure and what matters to the group and how you run your business. So I think if you look at it and use, let's say, I'll use, say you have McDonald's. I'm going to make this up. So if you have a McDonald's franchise and you own 100 McDonald's, and what you're really looking at is, in that regard, you may have different regions, right? And so you may have a north, south, and east region. And what you might be looking for is hamburger count. And you really have to get inquisitive on what is the right level for us to measure in the leadership meeting versus a layer below, because the information will start to extrapolate. And so I think in that example, right, if it's restaurants or franchises or something like that, or regional based businesses, it really should boil down to, how does the accountability chart break down, and what are the numbers at that level? I'd say the issue sometimes boils up to, in that if you have a lot of McDonald's, you don't, for example, have your own sales and marketing per se. You'd have like a sales and marketing manager. And so your sales metrics are just event-based things that the franchisor is handling for you. Operationally might be north, south, and east, or it could just be all one. And in that case, the numbers consolidate a little tighter. I think I lost myself in the sauce there, because I think the other way to do it is also realize your level below should have more data, more detail. When you get really good at scorecards and your entire business is using them, that's a great time to re-engineer and look at it from the concatenation standpoint. Because ideally, your numbers at the leadership level are some grouping of the numbers below. So when you start tracking at the leadership level, you start getting the numbers. As your organization grows, and there's numbers down below, what's the concatenation of the right numbers?
Yeah, you just addressed a bunch of questions in the chat, so thank you.
Okay.
And I think to relate to that, when you're accountable for something on the leadership team scorecard, like you are accountable for knowing what's happening out in all those stores. And so like maybe that number is green that week, but you know there's some pertinent thing in 5 of the 10 stores that you should mention on the issues list and share with the team. So that, you know, when things start to roll up to a bigger number on the leadership team scorecard, make sure if you own one of those, you are familiar with what's happening behind that in that detailed level at the department or the store that Marc's describing. There's quite a few questions there. Go ahead.
And that's important. That's the backup, right? When the number's off track and you drop it down,
Yeah.
you are going to need to say, hey, remember those deeper KPIs that we said that's not what they're for? That is when you probably need to open it to start asking your why questions, right? Like, why is this happening? Why did it happen? And then that's where those deeper other Power BI numbers and things may come in.
There's also questions around if you have a smaller company, like say that somebody sits in visionary and sales and operations, like do they report 2 or 3 for each function?
So, I mean, the short answer is yes, until they're no longer in the seat, right? The idea is you're not in that seat forever. Those measurables are owned by you because you're in that seat. If there's too many numbers, you know, simplify it. It's 1 to 3. Doesn't have to be 3 numbers per seat. It could be 1 number. But ideally, you know, if it's sales, whatever the right number is. But yes, if you're in a lot of functions, you're going to have more numbers because you're accountable for more seats.
Yeah. And please, no audience, I'm not ignoring your questions about the software. You just need to get the answers by chatting it into the software help because Marc and I are great people. We're not software help. So get your answer in the right place there. We're going to answer methodology questions on EOS. Marc, what if you are a director of ops and you're meeting with separate departments weekly and they each have their own scorecards? How do you ensure what measurables the director of ops herself needs versus like the group? Like how do you make all this work together?
So if you're presumably the integrator in the ops, so if thinking a pure accountability chart, you have your integrator, and your integrator would work if it's not, you know, with the ops person. And you have to agree and identify what are the measurables that you care about most, right? What are those 2 seats? You have to be aligned in those numbers. And then the layer below should be whoever's in charge of operations. First, look at what are the numbers that drive that bigger number? Like, what are the drivers? What are the leading indicators of those numbers that drive the one above? So each set of leading numbers, right, may be different as you go up the chain. Your accountability chart should be, hey, your integrator and you. So if you're integrator in operations, what are you aligned with at a leadership level to those numbers? And then you as the head of operations, make sure that you're aligned with the team below because you're accountable for the ultimate outcomes of that group. So you should be defining and be aligned to what those outcomes are. I don't know if that's the exact answer you're looking for, but I think
it's that plus I'm realizing a few people are confused about what do we mean by keeping the circles connected? Like scorecards within the bigger circles connected of L10 meetings across a company.
Say that one more time.
Like, how do you decide where you need meetings to be happening? Like who goes to what L10 and therefore what scorecards do they have within that?
So so here's the pure answer, I think is the pure answer is your accountability chart drives the level 10 meetings, the scorecards, who's in them. The issue sometimes boils into in smaller businesses, a lot of the people are repeating in the same meetings. So it's a matter of, do you need some of those meetings and do those numbers need to be in all those places? Would be the answer I'd give. I don't know if that's the best answer, but I think that's the real answer.
Yeah, and I often say to clients that the only place we're prescriptive in this in EOS is 90 minutes for the leadership team every week. Like you have to figure out what the right cadence and people is out in the different departments, and it looks very customized in each company. And so it's okay to have a little flexibility there.
Yep.
Marc, how do you advise people on using automation tools to track metrics and populate the scorecard?
Using automation tools. So, I mean, great. The more you can automate, the better, and you should. So, I mean, in the less that you have to have people digging around. So one of the things we ask clients of, sometimes people come up with scorecard numbers that are not attainable. You can't actually get them. They're aspirational. So in that case, you should put them on your issues list because you want to get them. If you can automate the process of getting your scorecards in and populating them, you should. I think that's if that's the correct question.
Yeah, I think so.
So if you can populate it automatically, I do know that, there's ways of just putting stuff in Google Sheets and auto-populating the numbers and pushing them. But the more automation you get, the better. Even if it's just an email with populating from Power BI to your scorecard and having an admin enter them, that's better than figuring it out every week.
Yeah, absolutely. And a fun fact, Mark, the questions are coming in even faster than we're answering them. So we will get to all that we can. You can always reach out to one of us if you want to have more specific questions answered. What do you think about when someone uses the yes, no answer as a scorecard measurable?
Interesting question. I don't think that's pure-ish. It's a binary number. I usually see that on 0-1s, like complaints, non-complaints. That happens. I've seen that somewhere. I'm careful where I go with that one. But if it's a yes, no, it's maybe one thing on the scale. If it's like, did it or didn't it happen? But that shouldn't be predominant. But there might be one there. Customer complaints 0-1, yes, no. But they definitely shouldn't be the overriding area. If there's one or two, I've seen it. I've used them before. Like, did this happen this week? Yes or no? I think that's a good one. If that's the way you're going to use it. 0-1, same concept.
Great. And someone wondered, should a company rock be listed on the scorecard?
It's a great question.
Good one.
You want to take this one, Megan? I think you're going to be better in answer at the purity on this one than I will.
I don't know if I'm always good at that part. I always say to people, think about if you're building a house, you need the right tool for the job. Like rocks and scorecards have different jobs. It feels a little redundant to me to put it on a scorecard, but I do have a few integrators that will put, percentage of rocks on track, and it should be 80% or more. So I see that, but like a specific rock on the scorecard, like, are we not using rocks the right way?
Yeah, is it a, I was going to say that. So that was a perfect, thank you for that. Because if it's a number and it's a measurable, then it's on the scorecard. If it's a rock, then it's a priority for the quarter. So you're trying to achieve something in that quarter. You shouldn't be measuring it as it's happening. But once a rock is completed, it may add something new to the scorecard as a way of also seeing it.
Yeah, the scorecard is a great way to operationalize something you created through rocks. Yeah. Just looking for another good question here. Let's see. How would you set driving indicators for account managers who service but don't sell? Okay,
that could be a trick question. So are they account? Okay, I can't ask the question. So I'll answer it in two different ways. If somebody who's an account manager is responsible for account growth, then it would be some measure of account growth. What happened for that account growth? Or inversely, what are the things they're doing to drive account growth? CSAT or NSAT, customer satisfaction of some kind. NPS is a great one because it's measured on a 1 to 10 scale and it could be live surveys. So for account people, it's either, or it could be both. I would say it's an NPS, customer happiness, some kind of happiness indicator, and account growth or some kind of account success metric. And so if it's not sales, it would be, I'm oversimplifying, but those would be the things that I would look for from an account management person. Great, thanks.
How do you answer when a client wants to know, how do you set up a measurable that calculates percentage achievement versus a monthly or quarterly number? It's like they're tracking against this goal that's
so great one for that is like year to date. So if you have revenue, so I get this one all the time, like revenue, and people think of it as a dollar figure, but it could be percent to goal or percent over goal. So as a weekly metric, if let's say your $10 million is your annual revenue target, you may want to know, where are we budget to actual, or as a percentage of. If it's below 90%, that means you're below where you're supposed to be. If it's above 100%, it kind of shows where you're above that. So 90 to 100 may be that threshold. That's a great way of saying you have a big number and you're doing percentages based off of those numbers. Lots of different ones. So actually percentage-based ones are really great because a lot of times teams sit there and they go, that's the monthly, sometimes that's the monthly or yearly big number, but where are we in conjunction of where we're supposed to be? So you're not always changing the goal. It's 100%. It's the percentage of where we're tracking towards.
Yeah. And I always say to them, make sure you all remember what the number is too, that you want to hit. Like, we've got to remember both. There's almost two pieces to it there. How do you approach tracking something more qualitative? Like if you're tracking the measurables within HR.
So qualitative.
Yeah. Like it's not always a number on a P&L or a number in some kind of reporting system. It's a little more people and fuzzy.
Yeah. So it's so I'll give you a few just random examples, right? Number of shout outs. So some companies want to make sure that we're calling people out organizationally a minimum of a certain amount of times. Now, that's one example. we track training hours is something I saw somebody just pop on. How are we doing with training? ENPS, Employee Net Promoter Score, again, is a great one. Where I avoid is quarterly or annual surveys don't really tell you much. They don't give you a pulse. So what are the metrics that you can look for that you can see in your organization that help? Those are just some quick examples of ideas.
And there's still multiple questions about what do we mean again by ownership of the scorecard? I think what people aren't realizing is it's usually the integrator. Like the integrator makes sure the scorecard is great for the leadership team and then holds those LMA leaders from leadership team accountable for making sure their scorecards are great in each department.
The other way to
look, are we not answering that one clearly, Mark?
Look at the, I guess the simple answer is the seat you're in. If it's a sales number and you own the sales seat, that's your number. If it's a marketing number and you're in the marketing seat, that's your number. If you've got operations, so use account management, right? Those are your numbers. And by your numbers, it means you're in that seat. You're accountable for delivering the outcomes and results of it. And I would also say when people feel that retreat, right, the wrong number, you have to speak up, because a lot of times what I see happen is we set goals that are not realistic, and the person who owns the seat isn't owning it. They're just like, oh, okay. That means you're not owning it. Owning it means you're stepping up. You know you've got it. This is the number you're intended to hit. And when it doesn't hit, you're accountable. It's your job. Hey, guys, how do we help? So you can ask for support, but you're in that seat. That's your measurable. That's your number.
And related to being your number, how do you balance giving people a number, like throwing a number at them, versus letting them help you decide what it should be?
So lots of, May I look for your advice here too? My answer is the person needs to buy in. You always need buy-in. You can't just give a number and say, this is your number. You need to make sure that it's a shared, keeping the dots connected experience, because if you tell somebody something, you're not asking them. So ask versus tell is going to make a big difference. If you tell somebody something, they're less likely to own it, would be my thing there.
I fully agree. I mean, it applies to everything EOS. Like we could all just make a VTO by putting it into ChatGPT. The power of it is that collaborative buy-in process of the leadership team together. So that's what creates the ownership of it. It's really important.
Yep.
Any examples for measuring creative, such as like a landscape design or creative in marketing?
Yeah, considering I've had multiple agencies and been part of them in multiple ways. So creative is usually what's the outcome of it. So if you do a design, was it approved, like number of approved creatives, number of approved concepts, or what's the reaction? How do you measure it? So social's easy. If you put something out there, did the likes go up, right? If you had one piece of creative and another, it goes up there. Ultimately, it's really how do you measure the success of what happened, what won, what lost, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So was it successful or not? We no longer live in a TV radio world. In a TV radio world, it was lagging metrics, and you'd say awareness and driving sales and people who clicked or talking about it, volume of conversation. But in a digital world, it's directly correlated to how many viewed it, how many did it, how many are running on it.
Great. How do you keep your level 10 meetings more engaging around the scorecard? Like I do find that some teams just kind of go through the numbers.
Ask yourselves, right? Say, just call it out. Be open about it and just call it and say, hey, this is feeling kind of routine. And a lot of teams, when you could even just add it to the issues and say, this feels routine. What are we missing? What are we not tracking? Or add something that is exciting for a quarter or two. Like if you've got an internal competition, if you're working towards, if there's a bonus or something like that, add different numbers, keep yourselves engaged. I think that's up to you. It's up to you guys as a team to make sure that it's not going stale.
Some people are looking for you to approve or deny their metrics. How about late project tasks? It creates a lot of controversy in their company. Any thoughts on that? Is it good or bad?
Late project tasks. I would say in context of what's the outcome that you're trying to drive to. So for example, if you're tracking late project tasks, is it you just want to know it? Are you trying to hold people to a standard? Is the number supposed to be 0? To what outcome? I think it could be a good number if it's telling you a story. For example, overtime hours is one where a lot of businesses have overtime hours, and they say we can't have any overtime hours. And first, the goal's wrong because it never happens. But what are they trying to drive to in that? So you're trying to drive it down, then great. And then if you're tracking late tasks, that means you're taking activities and actions continuously. If it drops below that, you're talking about it, you're fixing it, you're going to make it less over time. just like overtime hours, but it has to be something you're going to do something about. It's not just, you have to be willing to make the change. Again, I'm just guessing, but that would be, your goal should be to either have the indicator, but if it drops below, you're going to do something about that within your organization.
Yeah. Yeah. The big theme here is it's outcome oriented. Like you should see the number red or green and be able to answer, so what can we do about that? Like,
So what?
Can we go leverage? So what? It has to, it's just informational if you can't do a so what from it. So we're moving towards the last 7 minutes here. We probably have time for a couple more questions, and then I think we'll move to our closing slides. This might be a good concluding one here, Marc. Like, do you need an EOS implementer? What is it that we do? Like, how do we help people with things like this?
Sure. So double-edged side, right? So we always say you could self-implement the EOS, right? There's traction. You guys are obviously here. You know something about EOS. You could run it. You can set it up. The book gives you a great platform. What we do as implementers is we coach and guide you through it. So it's always, I think of it, there's a great expression that Ben uses, which is you can't operate on yourself, right? If you're a doctor, you can't operate on yourself. So even if you know something really well, it's good to have somebody else, a third party, come into the room. So you can do it on your own. If we come into the room, what we do is we foundationally help you set up the system. When we come into the process, we say vision without traction is hallucination. I started earlier. The whole point of that is we come in and actually set up the tools first. One of those foundational tools in our focus day, which is the first day in our sessions, we outline, we create the tools and the momentum. And the last piece we insert on that day is your scorecard. And it's the last piece because ultimately it gives you an element, gives you things to track, but it also lets you say, I always tell people it's going to take at least 3 months to get to the right scorecard. So it gives them something to start with, but every client I start with, it's the momentum and use of it that drives them to the outcome. And so working with us helps them implement it and helps us go from that standpoint of get you from 0 to 100 faster.
Love it. I'm going to give a shout out to Ben as well, because I actually have an analogy from him that I use for this one. Say you want to get from New York to LA. There's many ways you can get there. You could drive a car. That might be like reading traction, using a paper map. Like you're still going to get to LA. It's just how fast you want to get there. You might sign up for EOS One. That might be more like taking a commercial jet. Marc and I are more like the private jet. Like you get there fast, efficiently, you get to results. You can get back to your job faster and driving results out in the world, because that's ultimately why you guys do what you do, is to change the world. We can help you to get there with EOS faster. There are still 24 questions, folks, that we didn't get to because you had such great engagement in Q&A. We appreciate that. Please reach out to us. We would be happy to hop on calls, answer emails. Like I think that our contact info has been put into the chat there. We're happy to answer all your questions. We just couldn't get to them all today because we had hundreds of you here. So thank you for joining. I think we're going to bring back up the slide deck and have a few closing thoughts. Do you want to cue that up for us, Kelsey and Julie, or is that Marc that's doing that?
They got
it. There we are. So there is a QR code there that you can scan to get to EOS One software. Guys, one of the best things about EOS One is that there are free training videos in there. So if you want to get from New York to LA faster, there's a lot of help in there for you. Or you can decide to work with someone like me or Marc, and there is a code there to get you matched with an EOS implementer. So that's a couple of great ones. We left them on the screen for a couple minutes so that you can scan those if you want to. Our next slide is a big thank you from us. Thank you for spending your Friday with us. Great engagement. I feel like Marc's ready to go on Jeopardy, like he had all the answers. It was amazing. So thank you, Marc, for doing all the heavy lifting and teaching us today. Any closing thoughts of wisdom, Marc?
No, I mean, look, get started, right? Action creates momentum. So get some action, use a scorecard, have some discipline in it, use it, and you'll get to the right numbers.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome weekend.
Cool.
And I think we jump over to the other link in just a moment. Yeah.
For those of you guys still on, I think you're getting a survey afterwards. So if you guys can take a quick second, make sure you fill it out 1 to 10, same way you rate your meeting, right? And if there's a comment card in there, anything we can do better, or if you guys want to leave some notes, I appreciate it. Thank you guys for the time.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.